Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today, we're going to talk about trends and how they change over time. I'm always amazed when people are surprised by what happens, especially at work, when it's clear as day about the change that's coming or what's happening. And yet, people seem to ignore it. I think sometimes we're just too close to it and we're just hearing the noise in our bubble and we don't see what's going on outside of the bubble. And all of a sudden, you wake up and you see the world has changed around you. That's what we want to talk about today. What are those changes that are occurring? What's happening out there in the world? How can you prepare for it? And how can you ride the wave? Now, here's the thing. I don't want you to think I'm smart at this because I'm not. As you've heard throughout the episodes, I'm a slow adapter. I'm a little bit late to this, but I've lived long enough that I've seen the trends that I finally get it. And it just takes time to see those waves, to understand that the smart thing to do is to ride the wave instead of trying to fight against a wave as it's coming, which I did a lot throughout my early years. I've always heard, history doesn't exactly repeat, but it does rhyme. And so let's see how those things go. When I got my first job out of college, I was selling dictation equipment. Now, today, nobody even talks about that. But back then, we were selling essentially tape recorders for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars that an executive or an attorney or a professional would dictate into, and a secretary would transcribe and put into letters and so forth. But slowly the world changed, right? Computers came out, people started typing their own letters. And what we were always told way back then, which is a long time ago, was that one day you're going to be able to speak and it's going to type out your letter for you. Well, the reality is we're here today with that. And it's gone so much even further than that. But that company pretty much disappeared. And you started to see it happen. Back then, you could make a lot of money doing that. And then slowly they cut your pay. And slowly you started to see the market start to say, no, I don't want to do that. Or we're using computers or we're doing things differently. It was around the same time, and I've talked about this before, right? I graduated college and they said, well, you get a job and you stay with IBM for 30 years and then you retire and you get a gold watch. Well, that disappeared too, right? Job hopping used to be, well, don't job hop too often. Now people are lucky to stay somewhere 1 to 3 years, and companies are kind of still expecting that. All of these things are changes. And the question is, can you predict the change? Can you see it? And how are you going to follow it? If you think back to then, some of the other things that were going on was to make a long distance call actually cost money. It was like 35 cents a minute. Now with inflation today, that'd probably be a couple dollars a minute. Could you imagine making a phone call today and spending $1 a minute? It's free to talk to the world. We lost our secretaries. We gained administrative assistants. Funny, in most larger corporations, most mid-level management or most managers don't have necessarily an assistant dedicated to them. Whereas here I am in a small business and I do have my own assistant who takes care of a lot of stuff that I don't want to all around this podcast. But that is also because he's in another country. So it makes it much more affordable for me to be able to do that. That's a wave, offshoring. We're going to talk about how all these waves come together. On my other podcast, Profit Answer Man, I had on John Hewitt, who was one of the founders of the Jackson Hewitt Tax Company. So when the computers came out, he saw that you could go from doing paper taxes to software to do taxes, and everyone didn't believe that that was possible. I saw you could go from paper ledgers to doing electronic spreadsheets. The difference between me and John turned it into a $1 billion company. It took me like 40 years to figure out the value of it and do something with it. Still used it, but it took time. So let me ask you a question. As you think about your life, what are the shifts that you've experienced and how have they played out? What are the shifts coming to wherever you're working, whether you own your company or you're working for someone else? What's happening in your industry? AI is out. What is that going to change? The internet changed a lot. So what's going on? As we think about that, let's look at some things that have also shifted. We used to be a farming country. Now that's going back, what, 125 plus years? Then we became a manufacturing company and everyone worked in these big plants. And then we offshored all our manufacturing that went to China. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, in 1970, we used to import about $0 from China. Today, number one place for our imports. And they also went in 1970 from farming to working in those factories. That was a major shift for them. And so the question is what else are these trends? We are now in a trend of bringing manufacturing back. But when you build a manufacturing plant today, it's not like it used to be. There's not hundreds of people in there. There's a couple. It's all robotics. Again, another trend. Most people have a smartphone. That smartphone wiped out so much when you think about it. I mean, back to the long distance days, you had an operator, you had 411, which was information where you'd call to get a phone number. Yellow pages all disappeared, right? The iPhone, I used to have a GPS in my car. Why would I pay for a GPS when my iPhone has it? People used to have cameras and films. Kodak disappeared, digital cameras, and it went right to the iPhone. Sure, you can buy a fancier one, but most of that is possible just there. This is a tremendous amount of change. In history, I don't think there has been 100 years where you have seen so much change occur, and it's getting faster. So the question is, as AI comes about, as the shift continues to change, what jobs are lost, and what does this now make possible? That's really the question. And it's the one that I don't think anyone has the perfect answer to. I know I don't, but we can follow the waves. So let's talk about a couple other waves. We've talked about this financially, where I talk about how an immigrant comes, they work hard, they start to have success, they set their kids up for success, their kids have tremendous success, and then they spoil their kids. And in spoiling their kids end up those fourth generation with next to nothing, and they have to start over. Guess what? That's not just a generational trend with immigrants. It's actually a trend that occurs as a nation. And as a matter of fact, about 80 to every 100 years, countries go through that type of a change. There's a book out called The Fourth Turning Is Now by Neil Howe. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest you read it. It talks about these changes that are going on, and we'll get into that a little bit more and how they run through history. Neil goes back through every 100-year period and he shows you what's going on. So let's think about that for a moment. Here we are in the mid 20s. Where were we 100 years ago? We were in the roaring 20s. Things were wonderful. The shoe shine guy was giving out stock tips, just like the Uber driver is giving out Bitcoin tips, right? Cryptocurrency, same type of attitude. And then what happened? The Great Depression. Are we going to go through the Great Depression? I don't know. Will we have a downturn? Absolutely. What does it look like? No clue. But the point is, and why I'm telling you all of these things, is so that you can prepare for them. One of the big things you see is societal changes. So if you think about the Great Depression, everybody came together and helped each other. Then we started to grow apart and we had suburbs and, you'd borrow a cup of sugar from your neighbor. And then we started to grow apart. And then going back to the iPhone, everyone's living in their own world today. Nobody's watching the same TV shows. A million choices, a million variation, everybody all about them. That's the generational cycle. It's going to go back, which means we're all going to come back together. And as a matter of fact, as they look at the youngest generation, that's the behavior they're bringing about. It's coming together. The reality is you have to go through these cycles. Cycles are natural. So every day, the earth goes through a cycle. It's a 24-hour cycle, right? Every day you have dawn, you have dusk, you have night, you have day. The earth rotates. You have 4 seasons. It's a cycle. The moon rotates 28 days and something hours. It's a cycle. There's the cycle of growth with crops. They come, they go. There other cycles throughout history. Like real estate supposedly has a 26-year cycle, boom to bust. Is it perfect? I don't know. Stocks used to go through more cycles. We used to go through recessions on a bigger normal cycle. There's been a lot of change in that has distorted those cycles. One big cycle that has come to an end, and maybe not everyone's still aware of it, but more and more are talking about it, is the interest rates from the 1980s to just about a couple years ago went one basic direction, downward. Did they go up and down as they went down? Yes. But for the first time, we've come back to inflation and interest rates are going up. Trend right now is to say that interest rates are going to continue to go up. Does that not mean they might not drop next month? They could. They'll go through cycles, but the cycle continues up. The key is to look at the different cycles. Another cycle that's going on is demographic. So if you think about this one, we have continued to grow as a human population decade after decade. And probably in the last 100 years, we've grown dramatically. You look at countries like India, China, they've continued to grow, and China instituted the one-child policy. Well, guess what happened? As we've become wealthier, again, think about those economic cycles just within the family played out nationally. People are having less kids. So a lot of countries are predicted or are starting to see a decline in the number of young people, which means we're going to have an actual population decline. We're probably still 20 years out, but countries like Japan are much older. Even the United States, if you look at where we were 100 years ago, age demographic wise, we've got a massive older population versus a younger population. What does that mean? It means that you've got less working people to support the elderly. You have less working people to take care of the elderly. And if there's less people, there's less economic activity. And so those are the things that occur. In your local school district, they should be looking at the population trends to determine if they need more schools or not. Now, again, geography-wise, people will move around, but the reality is those trends exist. If you know how to read trends, you can make money off of it. And that's the way companies like Starbucks and McDonald's, right? They see where is the growth occurring. That's where they get in front of growth and they start opening their stores or securing land where things are growing. So you can look at Nashville, massive growth opportunities. You look at a lot of other parts of the country, and there are people exiting, a lot in the north going to the south. It's stabilized. I think we had a big wave during COVID, and now again, you have those stabilizations. Nothing's a straight line. It's an up and down as that kind of occurs. And that's what you've got to see. We're also seeing a lot of institutional collapse. The reality is we've forgotten about the old institutional collapse that happened 100 years ago because, well, we just forget. But it's happening again today. So if you look at government, if you look at education, if you look at the media, all of them are losing legitimacy. The old rules no longer work, but we still haven't figured out the new rules. And what that means is you've got a period of chaos. And I think that's why the world seems a little nutty at times in this period of chaos of destroying the old and figuring out what the new is. Now, there's another book that talks about this. It's called The End of the World is Just Beginning. The Collapse of Globalization. It's, I think the author is Zihan. If you look at it, for the past 100 years, we have kind of, as America, become an empire. We haven't taken over foreign lands, but we've started to do business with the whole world. We've started to import a lot of stuff from China, from a lot of different parts of the Middle East. We bring in oil, we bring in all kinds of things from everywhere. What we're seeing during COVID, and also because of the whole waves that go on, is a period now of de-globalization. And that is going to change things massively. And so you're starting to see things being produced more locally. Supply chain wise, political instability, all of those types of things. A lot of that started at the end of World War II, which is 80 years ago. And it's run that 80-year course, but now it's changing again. So the question is, what does that future bring? And if you think about it, a lot of people now are telling their kids, college might not be best, go into the trades. You can't export the trade, right? Having the skills to fix things, to do things, to grow things, it comes back to local. And that's going to change things. And of course, that may cause inflation, which we had talked about. Interest rates go up. Again, I'm not predicting anything. I'm just laying out different scenarios. You've got to think, which of these scenarios affect you? Because it could just be a local thing. The company that I originally worked for went out of business basically because nobody used dictaphones. The second company I worked for became commoditized. While they had a presence in the market at one point, then there became two, and then there became so many that the product became commoditized. And at that point, you don't have pricing power. And so they lay people off. A lot of other companies that I've worked for, I've seen that cycle happen. And the thing that amazed me every time it happened is everyone was just sitting there going, hopefully 5 more years, hopefully 10 more years. Everyone's just hoping. Nobody's doing anything about it. They aren't preparing. They aren't shifting. They aren't building a new skill. And then one day they get laid off and they're like, I can't believe it. Well, everyone saw the freight train coming, and yet we're oblivious to it. And that's the other reality. It's one that most people don't realize, that a lot of people in their 50s get laid off. And one of the reasons they get laid off is it's their highest earning years. And companies just go, that's a body. If I can replace that body for half the price, why not do it? And that breaks your psyche. And that's what happens to a lot of people who are defined by their job. And they get let go, not because they did a bad job, but because of shift or a recession or something, and then they lose their edge. And so that's why we've always got to prepare for what are these changes that are coming. In that book that I mentioned, they talk about how the world is going to fracture. Here's the good news. If you're in the United States, we're in a good place. The reason we're in a good place is not because we're the United States. It's because we have agriculture. We have minerals. We have short trade routes, meaning we can go and do trading with Canada and South America. So if you think about it, right now we're trading across the world. You could actually compact those trade routes. It also makes it easier to protect. So if you think about it, if you need to defend your country, it's a lot easier to just defend North America, South America, than to defend something in the Middle East, where they're having problems in some of those trade routes and ships are getting attacked and so forth. In the past, the United States protected all of that. At some point, we can no longer afford the infrastructure of healthcare, of Medicare, of Social Security, of all the government waste and bloat. And I think people are starting to see that that is coming to a problem. Our interest on the debt, especially with higher interest rates, is making it harder and harder for the government to be able to sustain itself. We did an episode about how government debt actually causes growth, because as the government overspends, that money ends up in the economy and then the economy grows. But you come to a tipping point, just like you do personally. Sure, I can use the credit card. I can let the bill slip for a month or 2 or 5. And then all of a sudden, and quickly, it all comes crashing down. Same thing happens with countries. We forget Rome fell. You know, when I was growing up, I always heard about the British Empire and how the sun never set on the British Empire. There's no British Empire anymore. It got too big. It got too fat. It got too hard to control. And that's what happens over time, is these things are constantly occurring. You can see them coming if you slow down and you watch and you look. What are the trends that are going on? So what do we start to do? Well, how do you create self-sufficiency? You hear all these preppers, they're getting off the grid, having a well, being able to do farming your own animals. I'm not telling you to do that. That's a lot of work. But if you can set yourself up or have a way to get into those types of communities, then it's better. You have a little bit more protection. Be prepared for those types of shifts that are coming. It's a lot easier than if you're in a place that doesn't have that. We saw a little bit of that during COVID. The other thing that isn't talked about is access to cheap, secure energy is what really drives the world. So if you think about what happened, oil started to become a thing in right around the 1900s. Again, I'm not perfect at remembering that. Electricity became a thing around that time. We started to go from steam and coal and wood to an easier to use energy source. Well, when you have great amounts of energy, you can do a lot more. Solar, possible future. We're still figuring it out. All of these types of energies, though, are what drive the economy. One of the things that makes America one of the winners in that book was the fact that we have access to energy resources. We have access to farmable land. Again, going back to that. It's being able to do that, having those different things that are there. That's why when you're hearing about these trade talks with China, you're hearing about the rare earth minerals and so forth. Where are those available? Well, the reality is they are available in other parts of the world. We just haven't currently utilized that. But as things change, then those changes may come about as well. The good news is, again, they're talking about the United States being in a solid position. Most of North and South America, because they can be trading partners, should do well. Europe's going to have a different kind of problem. And part of the reason for Europe is they have massive costs of all these social structures. They have all these different countries with different beliefs. But the question, what they don't have is the infrastructure that we do of the land, the ability to get energy and all of that. They've got to rely on other countries like Russia and the Middle East and so forth. And if that's the case and the world breaks apart and those countries don't want to support them anymore, how are they going to get it? How are they going to have that support going forward, which then causes them to have a massive amount of struggle? The same thing in China, though. When all those farmers left the farming and went into the factories to make stuff for us, they forgot how to farm. So what's China going to do without young people and without farmers? How are they going to feed their people? These are the demographic shifts that are occurring. Bottom line for all of this is you have agency. You have the ability to choose how you're going to change yourself, how you're going to rework yourself into the new world, and how you're going to be able to do these different things. But you have to choose. It's a mental game. That's why we talk about mindset so much. It's how do you view the world? How do you view the shift of changes that are going on? And what are you going to do to prepare yourself? I think one of the biggest things that's missing is critical thinking. And unfortunately, what happened with our school systems is they designed a school system for manufacturing. That's wonderful if you're a manufacturing country, but we aren't. We haven't been in forever. I don't know the last time you walked into a school, but schools really haven't changed. You all sit in desks in a row with no longer a blackboard, a whiteboard up front, or maybe a digital projector projecting on the wall. The subjects haven't changed. They haven't done anything different. And so if you're moving into a new world of AI that can write your book report, teach you math, do things differently, how are you learning differently? How are you utilizing those resources? And do you even know how? We did a great episode on using AI as a thought partner with Jeff Woods. I use AI for so much of my day, but I don't rely on AI. Why? Because AI hallucinates. And if I don't know enough to know when it's hallucinating, I'm going to be like those people who follow their GPS and drive off the road and into a ditch because they followed the machine and they didn't think for themselves. How often do we laugh at them? And yet that's what it is with AI too. You've got to be able to think. Now, a lot of people look at our political system, we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Going back to the book, the fourth turning is here. It's just what it is. That is the cycle. That is the way people behave at this part of the cycle. And so it's nothing new. You could have predicted this. He did, because he wrote a book about this 20 years before this last book, saying this is what's going to happen. Then he wrote the book to say, look, it's happening. We've had futurists on. They talk about that. One of the cool things, though, that I think is happening, I know a lot of this has probably been a little gloom and doom. Science and religion used to be together, and then they separated, and they each went their own way. They're coming back together. You're starting to see spirituality and science reconnect. Physicists are looking for the God particle. There's a lot of neat things that science is showing us on the energy side that's happening. We've had a couple episodes where we're talking about how humans are becoming much more consciously aware, much more in tune with the world. And if you go back hundreds of years, I think we were much more in tune with the world. We saw how things would work together, and you had to, otherwise you didn't survive. And so more of that, I think, is coming to be. We're learning to be more connected. And so there are some good things that are happening from that. AI is definitely a major shift. I think just like when the internet came all around and people lost jobs, and even before that, the different things that occurred technologically, people kept losing jobs. AI is causing people to lose jobs already. There are a lot of companies that are right now saying, we're not hiring. We're going to see how we can replace a mid-level worker with AI. A lot of things that were done manually can now be done electronically. They're building better robots. How is that going to apply to manual labor? I don't know yet. But if we think it isn't, then we're not seeing the freight train coming at us, are we? So how do you create a mindset of constant learning so that you can shift and change? How do you see what the future looks like and start to predict a path forward? How do we make those changes? I think stability and the great stuff we've had in the past isn't necessarily there in the future. How long have we all said, will I ever get paid in Social Security? Will it be there for me when it's my day? Who knows? Depends on how old you are. But the reality is, if you take agency, if you control your choices, your life, your money, you have that kind of freedom. You get the ability to choose, to escape, to build a little bit more for your ability to survive. I'll tell you, one of the things that was kind of scary was watching the movie WALL-E. There is this scene in the movie where literally everybody is overweight, sitting in chairs, and the chairs are just whisking them around everywhere. They're staring at a screen, and they ask for a drink, and the drink literally shows up in their hand. I think it was a drone, but we didn't know about drones back then. And it's like people are just living in a bubble. Not much different than what we see with many people today, living in the bubble. You don't have to live like that. I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is who benefits, right? Who is it that is getting a benefit by me doing something that I'm not paying for necessarily? Part of that is a lot of social media. You don't pay for it. So where are they making record amounts of money? They're selling stuff to you. It's a marketing game. I know a lot of people these days are Uber Eats or convenience. I don't know, have they ever looked at what their cost of convenience is? If you order something delivered through some of these apps, you're probably paying 40 to 50% more than if you went and got it yourself. Not to mention, we're not even going to talk about what's in that food because it's not really food, but that's a whole different game. So what are the things that are there, and are you kind of going against the grain, or are you just following it? And the question is it taking you on a drift to a place you don't want to go, or are you following a wave and surfing it to your advantage? Or are you going against the current, which is really hard? I got to tell you, I spent a lot of my life going against the current. And it's because I didn't like some of the currents. What I didn't realize was to find the currents that serve me and figure out how to surf those in a way that made sense for me. And I've done that now. But it took a lot of kind of learning life. And that's part of the problem is until you go through it and you see it, you don't get to really understand a lot of it. And so that's why we always talk about money. Money just gives you the freedom to make more of these choices, to plan, to be able to move and figure out things and to create, let's call it an escape hatch to where you want to escape to if things change dramatically. Bottom line, if you look at education, it's faltering. The biggest thing I think if you've got kids is teaching them how to critically think, how to actually look at our biases, the way we think, our behaviors, and then also making sure that what you're doing is actually true. Is it real? Or are you just making assumptions that you've never challenged before? Too often there is so much marketing. I mean, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was created by Montgomery Ward. Diamonds or De Beers, like they convinced you that if you get married, you have to have a diamond ring. That market, by the way, is falling apart with fake diamonds that are happening. What are those different things that we've been told are good for us? You know, back in the day, what was it? 4 out of 5 doctors prefer smoking this brand. Seriously? All of these things are changing. Even alcohol has seemed to peak and people are staying away from alcohol. I know I do now. What are those things that are happening within you? And how do you constantly pivot? And what are the little things that you can do that compound? So we talk about compounding with money. Compounding works with everything. We had Jeff Woods on to talk about AI, but he also wrote the book, The One Thing. And in The One Thing, what they talk about is a single domino can knock over the Empire State Building if you just have about 30 dominoes right after it. But the key here is each domino is 50% bigger than the domino before it. So one domino can knock down a domino 50% bigger, it can knock down a domino 50% bigger. It only takes like 30 or 35 dominoes where you're at the size that domino can knock over the Empire State Building. That's compounding. What are you doing to compound in your life so that you can navigate these changes and follow them? And you got to figure out what that is. I think people think of a W-2 job as security. We're finding there is no security. You know, we were told go to college and you'll have a great life. The cost of college, you're finding it no longer makes sense. So where do you take agency? Where do you challenge everything? Where do you look at it differently? The other area is health. Right now, I think our healthcare system has, again, just like everything else, it's crumbling. You've got insurance companies who are saying you can't get this or do that. But at the end of the day, what people don't realize is the number one driver of health is diet and exercise. The 2 words everybody hates. But if you do those well and efficiently and you're healthy, then you don't have to spend a lot of money on healthcare. It also allows you to be more resilient so that if we do go through economic shocks, you have the ability to survive them. And as you get older, like I am, you have the ability to survive your older age and enjoy life still and still have the time left to do those types of things. At the end of the day, you know, everyone's running towards retirement, but if you retire and you're not healthy enough to do anything, then there goes that wave, right? Again, a cycle. Our lives have cycles of what we do. And so I think that's a big part of it is know what those cycles are in your life. Know where you can catch a wave and ride it to success. Learn how those different things are occurring in your life with your skills, with the areas that you're working, and then do something. You know, surfers don't try and change the ocean. They just try and find the best wave and enjoy it. Same thing applies to us, right? Figuring out what's my one domino that I can use to start going in a path that does give me those freedom. You have the ability to be conscious and turn off the noise and say, this is the direction I'm going. It's up to you. All I wanted to do today is kind of just bring you to an awareness that these empires, these countries, the things that we become used to, they change. And when the change is slow, kind of like a frog in a pot of boiling water, we miss it. But when we take agency and jump out of the pot of boiling water, we get to live. These things are all happening. So the question really for you is, what wave are you pretending isn't coming? What would it take to ride it instead of getting crushed by it? Where are you still living by that old story that no longer fits the world? Where are the lies that you're kind of telling yourself about what's going on? If we're going to a season of winter where there's going to be a reset, who do you want to be when spring comes? How are you going to prepare for spring? How are you going to make it through the rest of winter? This is where squirrels save up their nuts so that they're prepared for those times. I think the fact that we haven't had a recession in 17 years, people forget. It's going to happen. I don't know when. I don't know how severe. So really what it comes down to is, who else do you know that you can have these conversations with? Use this episode as a way to start the conversation, to say, hey, what are the waves that are happening in our industry, in our life, in our country, around us? Are they going to hurt us? Are they going to help us? How do we ride them? How do we survive these changes and have fun and make them great? That's a choice you got to ask yourself. Go take a look around, make it happen. Thanks for listening today. If you got comments, I'd love to hear them. Have an abundant week. Hey, thanks for checking out the full unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can get the full audio podcast with intro, outro, and a ton more details here on YouTube or whatever your favorite podcast player is. Don't forget, we've got hundreds of episodes for you to go back through, and you can also get episode information on the Richer Soul website as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you're automatically updated as to what's going on and every time we release a new episode. The first few episodes of the Richer Soul podcast actually lay out the entire framework that everything is built on over all of these years. So check them out as well. Thanks for listening.